So this presentation, I kind of want to give you an overview of AutoCAD and some of the common commands you actually may use when dealing in a 2D workspace. And sorry for any of those people that are like super OCD and my face moved up slightly, but I needed to show you where it says model and layout. So I had to slightly move my head up. So apologize for that. So when you open up CAD, if you originally opened it up, you'll see a button around here that says start drawing, and you can start drawing. It'll bring you to this screen. And if it doesn't, it'll bring you to the paper space. But you have two things down here. You got your model space, which is where you draw everything and do your thing with that. And then your paper space, which is where you would actually end up printing from. So if you have like a sheet set that's 24 by 36 inches, or you're just putting it on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, like this one is for when needed to originally turn them in, you could create this white portion to be whatever size you want, and this is how it's actually going to print out when you send it from your computer to the printer. So generally you don't make any edits on this. I have provided you with this title block. So if you use that file I gave you called title block, it'll give you this, and the default settings of this are generally engineering and decimal degrees. But this is like a window into your model space. So right now there's nothing there. However, if I were to draw something over here, it shows up now over here. So that's kind of how it works. So everything you do is going to end up being in the model space until you are done. So let us start with certain commands. The main one you're going to be using a lot is line. And for me, there's two ways you could do this. You could either find the commands on the top ribbon within these, and you could click all these different buttons and find whatever command you want. Or down here, you have your command line, and you could just type in the specific commands. I have found this the best way once you start to get a hang of it, because there was some time in probably 2000s where they went to this like Microsoft Word, Microsoft product looking ribbon. It looked completely different before then. So there may be another update at some point down the line where these are no longer in these tabs or ribbons, and it's some different way of looking at it, and you're like, where the crap is my function? But if you know them in your head and you could just type them in, that's going to stay consistent throughout CAD, because that's already happened before. So that would be my guess. And CAD is generally very intuitive in that if you're like, how do I draw this? It's probably that word you were thinking about. So if you're like, how would I draw a circle? You could probably type in circle or something similar, and it's going to actually draw it. But I will show you kind of both. So if you wanted to do a line, you could click on this, and if you hover over it, it kind of tells you what's going on. So line will create a straight line segments, so on and so forth. And if you hover over these, what ends up happening is it shows you what you could end up typing as well. So like that said line, you could type in circle, or there's other, like you could see that says arc down there, that says move, that says circle. And sometimes you could even get shorter than that. Like you could type in L enter for line or C enter for circle, but those bolded words you could end up typing in to do the same command. And if your command line ever goes away, for whatever reason, and you want to get it up, you could type in command line and it comes back. Same thing with your ribbon. If your ribbon goes away, you could just type in ribbon and it'll come back. So the first thing you're probably going to use most is line. You could click it and then always read what the command prompt is saying. So yeah, you could see mine down there. it says line, specify first point. So it wants us to specify wherever we want to go. And you could type in specific coordinates if you want, but I generally don't draw that way. I'm not here to tell you, I mean, I kind of am, but there are many of different ways to actually draw something. So you may draw it different than me. As long as you get to the end product, that's all that actually matters to me. So if you were taught a different way and you like going that way, that's cool. So line, it says start first point. I left clicked to start the point, and it says specify next point. Now we could either just click someplace and go to there, or if we wanted to go straight down a specific distance, you could see that little text box is growing as I continue to go down. If you wanted to go 6 feet down, you could go 6. Since we're in engineering units, you have to put a apostrophe to specify feet. One of the presentations I give is going to end up going over that type of stuff, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But you could just type in whatever unit you want, or not unit, whatever number you want to go that distance, and it'll go. So say we wanted to go 3 feet that way, 3 apostrophe enter. If we ended up just typing in 3 enter, it's actually going to default to 3 inches. So you can see the difference in this line with 3 apostrophe versus 3 enter. So that's a line. And you could do the same thing where you could just type in, oh wow, just realized I'm not even typing on the keyboard straight on because I'm so used to playing games. So if we wanted to do a line, we could type in L enter or line enter and do the same thing, and it starts from the last thing. Specify first point. And we could do it that way. So that's line. Sometimes people like to use construction lines to kind of frame where they're going to do stuff. And a construction line, which I think it may be in here. So spline fit, it's probably this one. Yeah, construction line is X line. And you can see its description. It says creates a line of infinite length, so it just goes off in both directions. And it kind of gives you a picture of how it's useful. It could give you like snap points and borders of where you need to be. So if you know that your house needs to start on this line somewhere, you could start right there. So just to show you a construction line, it could go off in whatever direction you want, and it goes on forever. Okay, let's get rid of some of these. Still get obnoxious. I don't use them too much. We have to do an arc. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to do an arc, and if you push the down arrow, you could see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. There's 11 different ways to draw an arc. Most of the time, you're just going to end up using start. You just may do start and end or 3 point, certain things like that. For your site plan assignment, you're going to end up using start, end, and angle because you're going to know a start point and end point, and that little triangle symbol on the assignment is the included angle. So that would be what you insert for that. You may use start, end, radius. So say we had this line over here, and we had this line. I'm just doing L enter and starting a line. And we wanted to create an arc from here to here. You could just type in arc if you want, and it starts the arc command. And down here, you can see it says specify start point of an arc. Okay, I want to start here, and then read it again. It says specify second point of arc, or, so it's assuming you want to do a 3-point arc. But if we just know the end point or the center point, we could click one of these down here and just do that. So we did a start point, we'll do an end point. So it's changed to end point, which we know is here. And you could end up choosing the radius, the direction, or the angle. So say we wanted a radius of, I don't know, 5 feet. That is an arc with a start and end point there with a radius of 5 feet. That's how you would do it. If you wanted a specific angle, you could do the same thing. If you wanted to, you could start end angle and click the buttons, start, end, and say it's a 50-degree angle. Say you wanted it to turn the other way, you could just invert which one you clicked first. So say you were doing start and angle. If you went this way, that curve would end up going the other way. which is important for your site plan assignment. Say we wanted to do a circle. That's up here. You have a couple of different ways of drawing a circle. Center radius, center diameter, so on and so forth. So if you just type in C, enter for circle, you could start creating a circle. I started at that point, and if I know the radius, I could just type it in. Say I typed in 5 feet. Or if you wanted to specify diameter, you could see down there it says diameter, and the letter D is blue. So if you type in D, enter, it'll swap over to diameter. You could also just click it with your mouse when it said diameter and do the same thing. And if we did 10 feet, that should be the same size circle, because 5-foot radius, 10-foot diameter, same distance. Or same size, shouldn't say distance. Say we wanted to like create a hatch and a pattern in this. We could do that by the hatch command. So say we typed in hatch. It says pick an internal point. Say we wanted to make this into a hatch. And that's all we wanted to do. You could see the ribbon changed. Say we wanted this pattern, this ANSI 32. Right now, if we zoomed in, you could see that pattern is showing up. Since the scale of the pattern is so small, it just looks like it's a solid hatch, which is not what we want. The way we would do that is go through some of these properties. Say this one right here is a scale, so if we were to increase this, let's just go to, say, 50. Now we have this hatch that's looking nice and what we want. If we wanted these lines to go the other way, we could change the angle. If we want it to be transparent or add certain other features to it, like colors or backgrounds, we could do that as well. And if you go out of it with X, you could get into it by just clicking on it and do the same stuff again. So that's a hatch. Say we wanted to copy this circle and put it somewhere else. You have up here, you could click it. It says select objects. You could select multiple if you want. So if we wanted to select all of these, we could. And then you could see down here, it says 3 objects in total were selected. We could push enter, or we could right click. Both of those do the same thing in terms of advancing the command. And then it says specify a base point. So say I wanted to move this right here, or copy this to the top portion of this circle. I could then move this base point to here, and it would copy that object. And if you wanted to copy a whole bunch of objects, you could. It just keeps going until you push escape. So let's get rid of all of those. So, one other thing. If your selection tool, a lot of times I don't even realize I'm doing it, this selection of a rectangular shape happens when you click and let go, and then you click and let go. Some people will end up having this squirrely looking business, and that's because they're holding down their left mouse button. So it'll do like a weird shape if you want it, and that's fine. But if you wanted it to just be like a nice rectangle, you just click, let go, and then click. And then to delete stuff, you would just push the delete key on your keyboard, and then you could proceed with your day. Okay, say we didn't want to copy that, but instead wanted to move it. So say we're like, oh crap, we actually want the circles to touch and it to be on the other side. So if we type in enter for move, or you could click it up there and say we wanted this line and circle to all move, but we wanted this point to be connected with this, we would select this base point, it says specify base point, and move it to where we wanted it. And that's how you would move it. The main thing that I always have to stress to people is read whatever this command line is saying. A lot of the times when you're doing stuff and you're like, why isn't it working? It's because you're not reading the command line. And if it's still not working, the other tip that I generally give, push escape a whole bunch of times. Sometimes you're in the middle of a command and you don't even realize it. If you push escape a whole bunch of times, it clears it out, and then you just start over. Okay, so next one I want to do is rotate. Say we wanted this to actually rotate on itself 90 degrees. We could type in rotate. It says select objects. We wanted this to be rotated. Cool. Specify base point. This is going to be the point that it rotates upon. So if we do this, it's going to rotate upon that point. But say we wanted it to, oh, side note, if you just push enter when you're done a command, it repeats whatever the last command you were doing is. So say we want it to rotate upon this point and actually just be over there. So you select your base point and rotate it upon it. Mirror. Say we needed this to actually be duplicated. Sometimes you're able to just draw half of an image and mirror it upon itself to finish it. So if we type in mirror, we could select our object, right click or push enter, and it says specify first point of mirror line. So say we wanted to mirror it so it's the same thing on both sides. We need to specify 2 points of a mirror line. And you can see how that mirrors it. And if we go this way instead, it'll go that way. Or you could specify it upon an angle or a distance. But say we just wanted it to be there. When you do that, it says, do you want to erase your source object? If you only drew half of your drawing and you want to keep it, you would say, no, I don't want to erase it. And now you got both points. Now it's kind of starting to look like a bird. Okay, fillet. So you'll end up using this one a bunch in your assignments. Say you have these two lines and you wanted to make this curved. It told you it's a radius of 5 or something like that. What you end up doing is you type in fillet, enter, and then down here, if you read it, you have all these different things. If we knew the radius, we could do that. But say we wanted to make a whole bunch of radiuses and they were all the same. If we did fillet enter and then R enter and specified a 2-foot radius and just did this, the command ends at that point. However, if we do fillet enter and then M enter for multiple, like if you clicked multiple or pushed M enter, that will allow you to do it a whole bunch of times. So if we did M enter, then R enter for radius, and then 2 foot, we could continue just doing click, 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 and just continue this until we're done and push escape when we're done. Offset. Say we wanted to make this kind of into a checkerboard inside. We could offset these however much we want. Let me just see what the distance is of it's about 24. So let's just do like 4 feet. So if I type in offset, it says, what distance do you want to offset any of these lines? Say it's 4 feet. Boom. And you could just keep clicking and what side you want to go on. And you could do the same thing the other way. Say we want to do that one as 3 feet. Boom, 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 boom. And say we wanted that. That's how you use offset. Trim. Say we wanted to get rid of some of these lines in between. We could use that with the trim feature. And again, most of these are right up here in the modify if you like clicking the buttons. The easiest way I would say to use trim is if you type in trim and push enter twice. You'll see the first one says select objects, or in those that bracket, the less than and greater than sign, says select all. If you just push enter again, it essentially makes every single line in this relative to every other line. So whatever lines you click will end up disappearing unless it doesn't actually extend through anything. So like this doesn't go through. You can't trim this because it just deletes it. You would have to delete that later. But anything that kind of crosses through stuff, you could end up trimming. These ones you would have to like click and delete to actually get rid of them since there's nothing to trim. Layers. I have this other drawing up, which is like a 3D house that you'll do kind of for your project. So under the home ribbon, you have your layers. And if you wanted to create a layer, you could go into layer properties, and this orange button, you could create a new layer. And you can see it says new layer, it's like new layer, whatever you want to call it. Beep boop. Cool. And say we wanted beep boop to have green lines, and that's what we wanted. What you could end up doing is click on an object you drew, Right now I have that set to brick, so it ends up being this brick material, which we'll get into in the 3D version of this presentation. But right now, if you wanted to have change colors or line types or stuff like that, you could do that in here. So if we wanted to change the line type, we could load in a different line type. Say we wanted it to be this long, short, long type business. You could end up loading in that line type and changing. Nope, we weren't doing beep. We were doing beep boop. And change it to a center line type, and now it'll be a green long, short, long with some thick line with multiple C's, and it'll end up doing that. So if I drew a line and I change it to beep boop, you could see it changes to green, and right now it's not showing up as multiple C's because I never turned on the line weight. But now it's thick with multiple C's. But essentially what I would like to get across here is that you could create a whole bunch of different layers, and it helps you organize your drawing, and it allows you to help put different materials for certain things. So if I like a certain wood material, or like I want all my doors to be the same, I could call it door or wood or blah, blah, blah. And anything I assign to that, it'll change all the properties of it to that. And you could delete them here, or you could freeze them with these light bulbs and stuff like that, and they'll show up in this list. So if I didn't want to see that beep boop line anymore, I could easily just turn it off and I don't see it. It's still there in my drawing until I turn it back on, but it'll go away. So that's layers. I kind of went over line weight there, but you could do that by, if you click on a line, you could go up here and you can make it thicker if you want. Or you could also, if you don't end up seeing the line weight, it's very likely because this button right here is unchecked. Most of the files end up default with this unchecked, but if you check it, then the line weight will actually show. Similar to line type, you could go up here and you could add them in with other, or you could type in L type or line type, either one, and it'll bring you to this dialog box. Now you'll need to load in different line types that you want. So for assignment 2, BP33, you will end up using a center 2. Oh, we already loaded that one in. That has the 0.5x. You will need a hidden with the 0.5x. It just, those ones work for that specific drawing in terms of the scaling. And then you will need a phantom line, which is long, short, short, long, the 0.5x. And you push OK. Now you got these line types loaded in. And you could click on whatever line you want and you could change it. So you'll see that's now a long, short, short, long. Properties, if you ever wanted to see the property of something you drew, like say this line, you could left click and then right click and go to properties, or you could just type in properties as well. So if we just typed in properties and then clicked on this line, these are all the properties of this line. It's called beep boop, has a green color, phantom line type, thick, and then it gives you the length and so on and so forth of it. What angle? Well, the reason that angle is different is because we're viewing it at an isometric. But you can see all of the different properties of your line. Text. Say you wanted to enter in a text. The easiest way I like to do this is mtext. It stands for multi-line text. There's also just a regular text, but I pretty much exclusively use mtext. And you'll create a text box. You'll just click and let go and click, and it'll come up with this. And it's like, hey, you with a face. And there you go. And if you wanted to, you could go into the properties of it. Same way we were doing before. And you can make this bigger if you want. Say you wanted it to be 1 inch and make it bigger. Say you wanted to stretch this out, you could stretch it out. And you could choose different styles and a whole bunch of other stuff in here. Zoom. So you'll see I'm going in and out of this drawing. I'm using the scroll wheel on my mouse to do that. There is another way to do this. You could type in zoom and you'll see that it has all of these different options for doing it. If I just wanted to zoom in on hay, I could create a box around it and it zooms in on hay. If you wanted to zoom the extents of the drawing, you can do zoom extents, and that's everything that's drawn. Sometimes zoom all is also similar to zoom extents, but so there may be a drawing at some point where you zoom in and you're using your scroll wheel and it just won't advance past this point. And you're like, why can't I zoom out more? The easy fix for that is to just type in zoom enter and then all enter, and then it kind of resets it for you and it zooms out to everything you wanted. So if you ever get stuck in that predicament, you could use that. Viewing styles. So right here is the viewing style. It's somewhere else. It may view. I don't know. I don't use it much. I just use this right here. So if we went to a 2D wireframe, it's only going to show us the lines that were used to draw it. And you can see it gets a lot more messier. However, this is useful if you want it to specifically snap to this corner when you drew something. Or if you want it conceptual, which is kind of useful to if you got a slower computer and you don't want it to use as much of your memory and RAM and all that CPU type stuff, you could change it to conceptual when you're drawing, and it'll give you what the figure looks like. Similar, so you have all these different options. Realistic will give you the materials. And then, I forget if I called that viewing or visual style, but that's the visual style. This is the viewing style. So you could change it. I just want to look at it from a top view. I want to look at it from the left view. So on and so forth, however you drew it. This is the isometric view. I would highly caution against using this. This is called the view cube, I believe. I never use it because what ends up happening is you have like this UCS and WCF, the Universal and the World Coordinate System in CAD, and I don't know if this has been fixed, but I have noticed that in previous classes that students that end up using this a lot, what ends up happening is CAD thinks you're drawing in, say, a front view, but it's displaying it in a top view. So when you're trying to draw a line, what ends up happening is you're drawing a line and it'll only snap horizontally. Like you won't be able to get this angle right here. It'll only go in orthogonal directions. So left and right, up and down. It won't do this angle. So I could kind of, if I just snap this to 90, it'll do this. No, nope. There we go. It'll look like this. And you're like, I want to draw this at an angle. What the crap is happening? And that generally has happened when my students have used the view cube instead of this. CAD gets confused. There is a fix to it, which is if you go to UCS and you just change it to view, it'll end up allowing you to draw the way you were used to. But if you just don't use this thing, then everything is great and it works out fine. So don't use this. It's the devil. I hate it. Okay, drafting settings. Drafting settings are all these things down here. So you'll see that I have certain ones activated. Those are the ones that have the bluish background. If we hover over it, if you wanted a grid to be displayed, you could turn that on and off. And you could change the settings of it by right-clicking and going into the drafting settings. I don't like using a grid. It gets a little overwhelming for me. And if you specifically use the grid snap with it, when you're drawing a line, it snaps to each one of these things, and it's really obnoxious. Some of you may like that. I personally hate it. It is an option there if you like to use it. So I'm going to turn both of those off so I don't get super frustrated. If you wanted to restrict your cursor so it only goes in 90-degree angles, you could turn on ortho mode. So up, down, left, right. If this was in a top view, it would look better for you. Or I typically have polar settings on. And whether it's 30-degree angles that it'll snap to, or say 45s, you could set that, or you could set custom increment angles to do in here. I generally don't use isometric drafting, so we'll skip that. Object snap. So you'll see throughout my drawings, this little square green box will show up, and that is your object snap. So it's saying, I want to snap to something that I see there. And this is actually the tracking. So that's that extension line. So it'll track where you're going. But this one here, the square box, you could choose what you want it to actually snap to. These are the ones that I typically have on. So if you want it to look like mine, you could have endpoint, midpoint, center, quadrant, intersection, and extension all on. Sometimes I'll use tangent, but I use that a different way. Quadrant, it snaps to 12, 3, 6, and 9 on a circle. These are annotative scaling type things. I'll show that in a different presentation. If you wanted to go to different workspace models like 3D, what that does is it'll change your ribbon up here. So instead of having like that line and circle up there, it may have stuff like region and extrude. So you'll see these will change up here once I change that, and I probably should have done that in drawing 2 instead of this because it may take a little bit. So let's 3D basics, there we go. So you see these commands up here will change. So you'll have extrude and revolve and press pull and union, all these things you use in 3D instead. I generally just keep mine in drafting and annotation because I know most of the commands and I like seeing it that way. And then viewport scaling. So your viewport is here. Right now we don't see anything. We're either zoomed too far in or too far out. If we wanted to get there, right now if we wanted to zoom in and out of the paper itself, if we double click outside, so if you see we're in here, we could zoom in and out of our drawing. If we double click outside of this viewport, the part that gets bold, we could adjust the way it looks here. But say we wanted to find our drawing, we could double click inside, type in zoom, enter, all enter, and there goes all of our drawing. This is like a window into your model space. And then this is just information like how many revisions you did or your name, stuff like that when you're doing an engineering drawing. But the thing we mainly need to focus on here is scaling your drawings properly. So if we double click here, right now this is our scale, this 0.012 blah blah blah, and that's saying 0.012 to 1. So it's approximately like a 1 to 10 scale, because if you just did, or wait, no, 1 to 100, 1 to 10, 1 to 100, sorry, maths, 0.01, stupid, 0.1 would be 10. So we want to get this to an appropriate scale to display it, because people could understand 1 to 100. What people won't understand is what the crap does 0.015 blah 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 mean. So if we say 1 to 100, people will understand that. 1 to 50, people will understand that. We scale this to kind of maximize this space with a reasonable scale, and I have another presentation that'll kind of go over that, but that's what this is, and that's how you change your scale. If one of these does not work, like you have some architectural scales here and you got some civil, or those are all architectural, but say you wanted to add some civil engineering scales, you could do that by going to down here, custom, and you could add one. So say we wanted to make a scale that was 1 inch equals, let's do 10 feet. This is just a name. You could call this whatever you want. You could say stupid scale number 1, stupid scale number 2. I would recommend putting it as something like this because you you'll actually know what it is. The only danger to this is if you screw this up. So say you put 1 to 10, a 1 inch equals 10-foot scale is not 1 to 10. You would need to make this 1 to 120 because these need to be the same units. So 1 inch, you would need to convert 10 feet to inches. So 1 to 120 is a 1 to 10 inch scale. If you push OK, it'll now populate our list. It's in here. This should zoom out slightly because it's a 1 to 120 instead of a 1 to 100, and it does. It still looks pretty good. So that's how you do viewport scaling. And that is the basics of 2D drawing. There will be another presentation more focused on 3D drawings and like kind of stuff for your house, but this one I'm going to end here.